In my last video, I mentioned there was an accessory that I wanted for my Xtool S1 laser. And now that I have it, I'm gonna see if I can test the limits of this machine. But I don't have the full all-in-one kit, so I'm gonna have to improvise. Xtool does say that I should be able to cut and engrave up to 118 inches long, but since I don't have a 10-foot sheet of plywood, I'm gonna do this test with an 8-foot sheet. You may have seen something like this with their 55-watt CO2 laser, the P2, and they've done it again with this diode laser. This is the basic 39-inch conveyor for the Xtool S1. Their all-in-one kit extends up to 90 inches and has a few more of these conveyor extensions. To use this conveyor, you need to use the riser base, which I would recommend getting even if you weren't planning on getting the conveyor system. The riser base by itself is $199 and well worth the upgrade. It not only increases your max workpiece height from 1.7 inches to 5.3 inches, but there's also these slots in the adjustable base plate that give you the flexibility to do measurements in between. Before I get to the longer test piece, I'm going to try to run a few other projects to get familiar with the software and see how the conveyor performs. I've got a few scrap pieces of 1/4-inch plywood that should work. Let me know in the comments if you see what I'm doing wrong here as this engraves. There's two things wrong with this first setup. Of course, the engraving quality on this machine is great. I reviewed the S1 in another video that I'll put a link to in the video description. I'm super impressed with the speed and accuracy of this laser, but I am curious to see if adding the conveyor system messes with the quality of the engraving. Since this is just a test, I'm just gonna score the engraving to make it a fast test. I'm not gonna cut all the way through, and I'm not gonna run an actual engraving. Well, after running these quick tests, I do see some gaps in the etching, but this is 100% user error. I didn't install the back rail, so the piece was bouncing all around while it was engraving. On the back of the conveyor, there are two slots to add to the back rails. They're the two short pieces you'll want to add closest to the conveyor if you plan on cutting through the material. This is to prevent you from cutting into the conveyor rails, and these two short pieces look very similar to the metal pieces that come with the engraver for the bottom plate so they can tolerate direct contact with the laser. Did you guess one of the two errors correctly? Don't worry, there's still time to guess the other one because I hadn't seen it yet. Now that I've fixed the first error, I want to do a practical project. Here's a design that I downloaded from designbundles.net, and I think it would look really good in our dining room. What I notice is the work surface needs to be extended longer than the area you want to engrave because it needs to stay in contact with the rollers here in the front. The engraving went well, but I should mention that if you don't have a fume extractor hooked up, it basically negates the closed nature of this laser because it gets very smoky with longer engravings like this. Make sure that you're in a well-ventilated area because the open ends won't hold in the smoke. If you're going to be cutting through the material, there's an option for it to leave tabs in the engraving. This is very similar to a CNC router. The tabs are so small that it holds the piece in place, but you can pop it out with just a little bit of pressure. Now that it's cutting the profile, this is where I noticed something was off. As the wood's traveling through the laser position is static, and I smelled a strong burning smell. It's funny that you can tell a difference between something that's just engraving and something that's burning. Can you guess what I did wrong? The laser is burning right through the material in one spot, and something is missing. Remember those slots where you can put your bottom plate? You should definitely make sure that it's installed before you cut through any material. Well, now I have a little bit of repair work to do on my workbench, but at least the sign turned out pretty good. Here's a shot of the finished sign after I added a walnut frame, because who doesn't love walnut frames? With those test pieces out of the way, hopefully there's no more issues so we can test a longer sheet. I've got the front and rear rails set up for this, but since I only have the 39-inch setup, I'm going to improvise and hope it works on this longer piece.
Shoot. I don't have enough space. I really got to clean the shop. I think I have to move the whole thing that way.
I have these rollers that I'm going to be positioning on both sides to help support the longer piece. And here goes nothing.
I think that will work. I might need 2 of them, and then I'll need to move one to the back side once it feeds through. I hope it works. It's not perfectly level, actually, but like there's a little dip. This is going to be interesting. This board was really dusty. I mean, you can see it. And when I was pushing it through, these rollers started to kind of get dusty. So I'm going to clean this all off.
One downside to the system is the limitation on the thickness you can run through your conveyor. You can only fit up to 0.55 inches, just over ½ inch material through the conveyor. I initially wanted to test a 10-foot long board I have, but it's 3/4 inches thick. I'm sure they designed this system with cutting in mind because it would take forever to cut through 3/4 inch material up to 10 feet long. Nobody has the patience to withstand that, but I do wish they still allowed thicker material so you could engrave. I ran the calculations on how long it would take to engrave something that's 10 feet long at 240 lines per inch. If you ran it at 250 millimeters per second, it would take over 8 hours. And that's why I'm doing this test cutting instead of engraving, because I didn't want to wait 8 hours to do a test.
So if you want to be able to position it, there's these lines that kind of guide you. So I'm going to position it kind of on the line and then lower these rollers. So essentially it clamps down. I want to make it tight enough to where each of the rollers are kind of putting even pressure and the piece isn't going to churn. So you're going to want to position the tool head kind of toward the front of the machine to give you the most usable space. Plus you want to be over those pieces that can be cut through, essentially. So I'm going to just square it up. Dang it. Okay, so what I forgot is I have to back off the dimension from here, from the rollers, to the material from the workable space. So even though I have a 8-foot sheet, I have to back off essentially 10 inches, 240 millimeters. So let me do that. Let's see if that works. Oh, it just fell off. Okay, I think I figured it out. I was using the factory edge, which was a little bit warped, and so I flipped it around and I positioned it. I ran it manually a couple times through. I tightened down the rollers, and we're gonna see if that works, because now I'm using a cut straight edge, and so we'll see if my cuts are straight. Let's frame it up.
Okay. Oh! Okay, let me tell you what happened. I used the default of 2 tabs when I was cutting those pieces out. What I really should have done is make it 4 or more tabs so the pieces didn't come disconnected. Since the letter fell out and my rails weren't long enough, the letter got caught and stopped it coming back through the conveyor. All in all, I learned a few things with this conveyor. Pay attention to the overall dimensions and give yourself some margin on the end for it to make contact with the rollers the entire time. Look at the colored markings when you're adjusting the rollers to make sure that they're tight enough or snug enough and that it's not going to spin, that the rollers aren't going to spin. Make sure that you have enough tabs in your pieces so they don't fall off during cutting and then prevent it from moving through the conveyor. Spend a little bit more money and get the extra rails so you don't have to retrofit something like this. Really just stick to the dimensions that your rails will give you. This project isn't for anything in particular because I really just wanted to test the capabilities of the conveyor. If you want to learn more about the S1 laser or see the Creative Space software updates that were just released, check out these videos right here. Until then,